Hello everyone, this is Papa Smithy, and you're on Thorin's YouTube channel, so brace yourself for some banter.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Elitists United with me and Veteran here. I've got in the bottom right-hand corner, Grabbz, head coach of G2. In theory now, these are actually bad drafts. It's not even a joke anymore. So we'll get to that though. We'll get to that. Listen, it was all fun and games when you could have just fucked around and won all these games. I think you're trying your hardest now, mate. Right, in the other corner, we've got Mac, head coach of Mad Lions. Interestingly enough, not French. Therefore, actually one of the few people in the organisation who's cool with this show. So, you know, if anyone's... Just a shout out to Duke, basically, who left in the past, you know. he was mildly triggered by the show. I don't know if you're aware of this, Mac. Like, I think it's mainly Veteran, to be honest. I didn't have any problems with him, you know. It's mainly Veteran. And I can't entirely blame him for that, you know. Some people do get triggered by
I heard
Veteran.
you were a saint, actually.
Compared to Veteran, I'll come off looking pretty good, mate. I come out the other side looking clean. So, like, let's start. I mean, for a start off, you know, I don't just berate people about whatever happened at 9 minutes into a VOD they can't remember. So I give him a chance at least. I give him a sporting chance, you know. I try to just make it like large-scale topics. So speaking of large-scale topics, right, we're not going to go into the minutiae of every game since the last time we played, because since there's now like this like hybrid double elimination system, it means there was that whole OG versus Rogue series, which quite frankly wasn't very eventful. It wasn't actually even a particularly good series, I didn't think. But let's talk about how about the OG versus G2 series, because obviously this is a very interesting one. So Grabbz, I've got a question for you. Coming in, all the shows I watched and all the analysis I heard from people publicly was actually everyone thought Origin had no chance in this series, and that actually like they had no matchup where they would win, and there was no way they were going to win the game. The game I saw in that series looked like it was mad winnable for both teams. There was a lot of play in this one. What were your expectations coming in?
I'm rewatching it. I mean, hard to say that it wasn't that close, but it never felt close for us. Like game one, for example, was free as fuck, and then like when you reach the point of Azumi, like the players were giggling in comms, and then just see Azu eating over the wall. Ah, shit, I'm dead, guys. Like that slows down the game a bit. Game two was the Fetus Zillion, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just when you say it wasn't that close, I'm just thinking that's because obviously.
I'm just thinking, right? I'm just thinking.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, but I'm just going to say, like, there was that one game where if NateDOhDoubleG hadn't thought he was just like a fucking VR spectator inside the game watching like a team fight, I think Origin could have won that game. That one where he's on his ear.
The Casio one, you mean? That's the second one then. What were the comps? We had Fink Mao, Zillion, Aphelos. I mean, that comp as well, if we just don't do anything, we also auto win. But we really ending there. Like, I don't know. Like, I really hate also to say we end. It's also the same thing I'm going to say against Matt series, but that's how it feels for us, right? Because we know what the win condition of the comp is, and if we then say we're going to outscale, and then suddenly I see your guys fucking pathing like psychopaths, then the game's going to be hard. But
do you think you outdrafted them over the series?
I think it's hard not to. Like, if they open the first blue set game banning Kalista, Syndra, and Pantheon because they don't play the champions, then I think it's really hard to not have good drafts, even for me. Like, I think the Azumi was a free win. I think the fourth game was a free win. I think the Fetus, like all three games we won. I think even game three we lost. What was it? We had the Vars into the Scorch, right? We were like, fuck up
it was
the dive.
It was the Pantheon Town Kench one. Yeah, the super extended bot dive.
Yeah, I mean, that also, like, I think if you also then just don't dive and play for Drakes, then also we control the game. But then again, I mean, that's not hard if they have to ban 3 OPs or like 3 really strong champions because they can't play them. So, yeah, I think they were very limited in what they could do in draft.
Okay, Mac, what was your perception of this series?
I think it was pretty back and forth. I mean, I think from the position that Origin were in, they should have been able to do more in some of the games. I mean, I was going to comment on game one, but Grabbz already said, right, that like, I mean, they get the Nash, they get 2 inhibs, and then they're like just having fun, right? And like 4 carries die in a row for no reason. But that's kind of a G2 thing, right? Like sometimes they just start like trolling for like 5 minutes. I think given the position of some of the games, like you said, Grabbz, you were just kind of outscaling them, right? But
I checked the comps again because I have to like remember how the game went from there.
second and first game, you're definitely outscaling them. Third, it would be like stylistic because you're doing double global into 1-3-1. And then last game, I'm not sure. I'd say you're outscaling them. But
I can't remember the last game draft.
Yeah, last game
well.
they're not. Last game, actually, well, I mean, Tarek's really good there, but otherwise, I don't think you outscaled them. I think Origin actually outscale you in the last game.
The Tarek, really, the Tarek game.
Yeah, the Tarek game.
First of all,
Yeah.
I mean, they open up with set jungle blind pick, which I don't think is necessarily that great. So they have They have Nautilus, they have set into Tarek, even Aatrox into Tarek, and the Kai'Sa who's short ranged. Like I don't
free
see
win for Tarek.
every single fight that we have Tarek ult, we can't lose. The only thing where this game is close, is because we fought without Tarek ult. Like for example, the one time we for some reason flash into Kasu mid with Tarek, we kill her, but we don't have the ult for Drake anymore. Like
there is an ability for team on the left to kite it out and then re-engage later on only because of the Cassio pick. If it wasn't for the Cassio pick, I'd fully agree with you. But otherwise, they do have the damage and they do have the CC to just stall and turn on the Tarek ult. If it wasn't for that, I'd 100% agree with you. It's a lot more debatable.
But the thing is, like in this comp, is I don't think they win the 3v3 mid with set Nautilus against Tarek because the only mode they can get it is by fighting, so they can't. So get mid priority. We are first on objective. That means Casso needs to run into us. And then if a card is effect with Tarek ult, they can't win. Like that's how it should go. But if you fight beforehand, use the spells, then it's hard.
I will agree with you if you've opened.
Like all of the ultis were just like flying left and right. Like there were fights where I think Mickey didn't use Tarek ulti or used it like super late and someone gets one shot beforehand, and like MF ulti like misses 5 people or gets interrupted insta. Like those fights were like super free.
I will agree with you. If you open Soul Win condition, then I do agree with you, and you should be looking to do that with this composition. But if you're not doing that, then it becomes a kind of Garen Yuumi-esque situation, where even if the Garen Yuumi ends up falling behind, just because you end up with like Baron doesn't necessarily put you in a good advantage over them, because now you have to close out over tier 3s, and the turn from that composition is also really, really strong. So if you view it in that kind of scenario, unless you're opening Elder, etc., which I think you ended up doing, but my memory might be a bit fuzzy on this one.
Even with Nash,
then you'll actually
on 3 lanes and they can't do anything. Like I think if Perks just waits for a second and doesn't get
caught. If you play on 3 lanes, the value of the Tarek vanishes. If you play on 3 lanes, the value of the Tarek vanishes. They have really good catch with Nautilus set Kai'Sa. They can burst on 1 and then shift, and then you guys.
Sorry, I don't think I disagree with you thinking that now set Kai'Sa is good catch. Like if you walk up to them and get hooked. Yeah, like
no, but he's talking about a 3-lane split scenario, so it's not Tarek in all 3 lanes, right?
Like Naut wants to be where Tarek is, right? Because else we have numbers advantage there and can just dive. So if we have Olaf in mid, Akali in bot, we just wait for him to push a tower in. Like
I mean, the Baron push on the last play where Perks get caught, well, like not the last play, but like the Baron push on that play is like. Yeah. Like that, the situation is like legit free, but he over pushes the bot wave, so then he has to catch the bot wave in a super awkward position, and then he gets caught, right? But like if he doesn't push that bot wave, it's like legit doomed, like it's completely over.
Yeah, Set does not engage. Set just runs and then does nothing.
Yeah, if you crash all 3 of them, and then you shift.
I mean, that's how I play Nash.
I can see
put it
that.
this way, right? They already had full deep side vision on top side, right? Because they've pushed mid and pushed up, right? So all they have to do is now like drop into Fog of War. Akali waits for like 10 seconds, and then she pushes the wave. And
I have to bring up the VOD then.
Let me say it that way. If we get flanked on by a set jungle, then we just deserve to lose. That's just how it's gonna be. If you play 1v1.
Oh no, I'm not talking about flank at all. You know, I'm talking about flank at all.
I mean, even worse if it smokes at us.
You know, these are the things Grabbz draws on the like the fucking chalkboard before they go out. Like, if we get flagged by a set jungle, we deserve to lose. So just play the fucking game.
It's true, but I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about when they are opting in for the crashes, instead of just waiting for any of the crashes in, you just opt into a force on one of them. And obviously Perks isolated himself on one of those pushes, but it's not like everyone's just oinking at the tier 3s waiting for you to do that. You are looking for tier 3 crashes on that, but you don't necessarily get forced into that sort of situation unless you want to abandon the crashes. And if you do abandon the crashes, then your waves will be out of sync, and it's not as simple as crashing all 3 and then shifting along. Like there are windows. If you have
waves on next play super easily.
Yeah. But if you have to resync the waves on next play, then that's Baron timer down. That's actually really
next wave
at that point, right? No, you can't do it on immediate next wave. You have to do it on the wave after that one, theoretically. But
I think you can. I mean, I don't have the VOD open.
Yeah, I'm actually desperately trying to find the VOD to go straight for it.
This should not become like a Game 4 simulator of what happens.
Yeah, because we'll end up doing it.
I just think like even team fights are not our style, and we have to learn it because that's the meta right now. I think in all maybe Game 3 don't, but like in all games we have a better comp for those scenarios. And then
when you say that, what do you mean? Like you prefer to just find skirmishes or something? Because I mean, that seemed like the way you played against Mad Lions the first time.
Yeah, but like that's just how G2 was or is. Like if you think back the last 2 years, usually the OPs are Akali, Sylas, Ryze, Aurelia. Like 2018, for example. Last year, even MSI, it was like Ryze, Jace, Aurelia, Akali, even Sylas. Like they're all champions who can team fight, but they're like mostly duelists and want to go side. And now suddenly the meta changed a bit more, and we don't find those champs that often. Like Perks makes Akali work, but I think we're the only team in Europe who does it right now.
Sure.
There's like Kiana from Hunite, for example, who like goes in a similar style, but she wants to flank. She doesn't like push side necessarily.
She's not like a split pusher, right?
So yeah, like we can't find those picks that we like played for 2 years in a way, and they're like always good. And I mean, there's a reason why Wanda plays now Maokai and Ornn, because it's just not that feasible anymore to ignore those champions and pick something into it, because execution is just so simple with those tanks at the moment, especially if the AD carries or something like Misfortune or Feelers. So that's also something that we weren't that comfortable with. And as you could see, as you said, against Matt, we tried to like branch out and having something like a Ziggs bot or something. But that didn't go too well either, right? But yeah.
What did everyone
think?
Yeah, go on, Mac. Yeah, go on.
I mean, basically, you have teams that are like solo lane centric and teams that are ADC centric, right? And if you're a solo lane centric team, which G2 has always been, then you prioritize like side lane push and then rotational advantage to create numbers advantages and skirmishes in the jungle, right? Whereas if you're an ADC centric team, then that's not what you prioritize. You prioritize like grouping up aggressively on 2 lanes, forcing an objective, and fighting your opponents to the death in a team fight, right?
Yeah, you should just do that, Grabbz. Just become an ADC centric team.
It's simple, right? Just do it. It's very simple.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, also, I have to say it now because this Giga triggers me with the whole caps perks.
All right, come on,
right?
come on.
First of all, people seem to forget that perks was not the god tier AD carry in Spring.
That's true.
Like it also took time.
MSI did erase that from everyone's mind, I noticed.
Yeah, but MSI was 3 weeks bootcamp in Korea, right? And that gave us so much as a team, especially because we scrimped Promiscu, who is a bit worse, but he's worse than Mickey. That means Perks had to actually think more about what we want to do as an AD carry. So that also improved him. Secondly, the mistakes we're doing as a team have nothing to do who plays what. We're just giga-inting by not playing on tempo. Like if we watch the Mad series we're going to talk about, every single death is like a weak side death that shouldn't happen. We're just running around because we don't know they can group and we just get caught out. And that's not on if Perks plays AD carry or Caps plays AD carry. It's just because we're bad. We were bad at that series. And then saying, oh, G2 is weaker because now suddenly Caps is AD and Perks is mid. It's just a very easy cop-out to not look at how we play the games and what mistakes we're doing. And that's just like, I just think it's way too easy. And of course, it's a narrative, and you can always go back to that, but it had no impact. The only impact it had is that Caps had to relearn how to, what Mac alluded to, like control the game as an AD carry. That's the only thing he had to learn. That's the only thing that's different. That's also what we improved on, but yeah, like those games were not because we are like Caps can't play AD carry. Like, not at all.
I mean, that seems like that. But I do have to say that seems like a little bit semantic because Perks already knew how to control. Perks already knew how to control from mid laners and AD carry, right?
No,
but Caps didn't.
No.
Perks definitely not in spring, but Perks definitely did by the end of summer. You guys were very, very strong at 1v1 server. Yeah.
But we're not in summer yet, though, right?
So swapping Caps for Perks, saying that's going to make a difference.
I know what he means.
The point is about being our experiment is a failure. Caps will not be as good as him. It's like that's also the point.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's the point you didn't make there. You needed to put the context in that just that in theory, Caps his journey hasn't ended in the same way Perks did. Right. It sounded like you were saying that Caps now, how he plays AD carry, is no different than how Perks at the end of last year would, which obviously is the main problem as to why people are bringing that narrative up. I get what you mean though. If you just contrast only spring, it's not as damning, certainly. And actually, the Promiscu angle is a pretty good one actually, because jokes aside, that obviously would change how you played the game. If you don't have Mickey X there anymore and you have to fend for yourself and you're a fucking Korean boot camp against the best teams in the world, you better level your shit up. That's not even a diss to Promiscu, he's just not Mickey X, is he?
No, I mean, that's not, even with Promiscu, we beat like many bot lanes there in boot camp, by the way. Like he actually performed really well in those scrims. And the point more being is that when Perks started as a AD carry, Mickey was leading more about how we trade, right? How we actually approach bot lane, because of course Mick had experience.
Yeah, sure.
But after the whole Promiscu time, Perks felt more confident in his own opinion because he made it work with Promiscu and could like discuss with Mickey on another level. So that's what was so beneficial, because that just solidified Perks as an AD carry, really.
Exactly.
Because he was not depending on Mickey anymore.
Perks didn't have to rely on one support anymore. It became promiscuous.
My God.
Yeah.
There it
I'll
is.
be here all week. So, right. I've got a question, actually. Stylistically, in this series, I have a question, which is this. If everyone came in and they were expecting like the meme version of Origin that does just play scaling and just plays for the late game and all that bullshit, this wasn't at all the team I've seen in the lower bracket of this playoffs. Like, actually, they looked like they understood against G2. Like, they had to have not the scaling comp all the time. They had to actually have aggressive junglers for Cersei. Come on then, Veteran.
I think they got pigeonholed onto the Lee Sin pick, for example, but I definitely don't think they were playing for early at all. Like a consistent issue that Origin have is that they basically do nothing to juggle priorities around in early. They would prefer to just freeze 3 lanes permanently if they can, Alfari being the only one who does anything other than that. And Xerxes didn't play around any of that stuff on his Lee Sin game. Like, there were multiple points where he needs to be escorting wave in on midsection, then he can do that into a dive on bot side, for example, and he never opted to do that. He would just do like Krugs and then oink towards top side, then Jankos would show up on bot side and things would go slightly wrong mechanically for G2 and Xerxes would be able to collapse even though he's on the wrong side of the map doing absolutely nothing. They didn't play for early game at all. They didn't play to accelerate. That's why Ezreal Yuumi had such a good time there, because they got very freely to the Athene's points on Yuumi with basically nothing happening against them, even though the enemy team had been pigeonholed.
So you're putting this mainly on the G2 failure side?
I mean, yeah, like any sort of early advantage they got were G2 mechanical failure, but they were never going for any early acceleration, even if they had early acceleration picks. You could see their intent was never to do that.
I mean, they did fight early, but they took really bad fights, right? Like in game 1, they fight you guys on Herald, and I think Azir has like Mercs and a dagger or something, and LeBlanc is there on Ludens, and like obviously they all die, right? Like Aatrox has like 1.5k gold in his bags, and Maokai's chilling with his Sunfire, like I'm ready, and they like take the fight and they all die, right? So yes, they did some stuff early, but they lost the game for it in a lot of cases.
I mean, that as a definition of early, sure, but
it was like 11-12 minutes, so even
that's definitely not like early for me. Like pre-10 minutes is gonna be early for me at this
point. And all we need to do is look at their picks in mid lane, which is twice Azir, 1 time Cassio, and 1 time LeBlanc. And then the LeBlanc, if you can make a case, actually tried for early game. With Azir and Cassio, what veterans that is, you don't set up a wave to go bot and dive, which you usually want to do if you want to snowball early game.
Yep.
So I definitely don't think their game plan was a bit more aggressive than.
And they didn't even have a choice at the point where I was thinking of as well, because like in first game, NateDOhDoubleG did hold the freeze over Perks for ages, and that was really good, but it was turned into a slow push already. So you when you were recalling, you knew that you had that. You had the slow push there, and you had the slow push going in bot that neither side had the say on, and you decided to opt into top side instead, and it seemed really strange to me. Like they weren't thinking about. They don't think about this stuff. You can see that.
And even game 1, where like he has the freeze, but of course it looks bad for Perks to be like 20 CS behind. But with the comp they had, we just knew like they can free split. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If Ezra gets the 2 items against their comp, it's over.
Yeah, you don't want to extend that. And they even had the point where they couldn't extend that, and they still aren't looking to accelerate bot side. Like it's the whole thing was very strange to watch. But that is Origin. Like I kind of don't like that people say that they play for scaling, because the difference between playing for scaling and just not doing anything, right? There's a complete difference in that.
Well, I mean, there's a Spice Coach in here, so you could ask him, Veteran.
I mean, his team playing completely differently now.
No, of course, that's why it'd be totally not at all uncomfortable to ask him about it now.
Because we could either blame Duke, or we could say maybe Xerxes just actually isn't that good at early game. I would like to hear his thoughts on whether Xerxes' really strange pathing in all these instances is down to him, or if we're going to like loophole into it being Origin's fault here or something. Like you guys had a similar playstyle when Xerxes was there. Admittedly, Vizichachi was also there at the time, but you had a similar playstyle when Oda was there at the time as well. Xerxes being the only constant here. I guess you could say Kobe. I haven't watched TSM. Maybe you guys could tell me if they are looking like Old Splice or something, but Xerxes is becoming like the common thing ever since his EOL days. And people forget that even in his EOL days, the champions that he was really, really strong and known for, the meme shit like Rumble, etc., which you could say are aggressive, was generally stuff he was waiting for item swipes before he did anything on, right? So I do actually kind of want your opinion on this one.
So I think Xerxes is definitely a player who has a more defensive mindset in general, which is why I think you want like to pair him with someone who's like a really, really strong aggressive shot caller.
Sure.
I will say that like Splice, I don't think it's entirely fair to say that Splice was just like shit in the early game. A lot of the time, Splice actually had a lot of like gold leads in the early game. Like our first 15 minutes were normally really, really, really good, and then our like 15 to 30 minutes was really, 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 really bad. Right? Like I think actually we had like the second highest GD at 15 of any team in summer last year, for example.
Part of that was because Xerxes was power farming, so he had one of the highest goal differentials versus any other jungler in the game, even though he had one of the least kill participations in the early game. You had some really good comps. You had some really good comps where you guys would disable what the opponent wanted to do, but you very rarely played acceleration versus them, right? Like the really famous one is what you guys did versus Fnatic, which wasn't even like a Xerxes thing. You had Morskeren matching Hylissang's early roams 24/7, even if it would maybe cost Kobe, and then they could never get anything off the midsection. Humanoid stole the game. Or the ones that you did versus Rogue, where you had like the Gangplank Gragas versus Kled Skarner, right? And every time they went for a level 6 play top, you just stopped them in their tracks. And then we get to the 15-minute period, like where nothing happens for ages. But it's good because they didn't get anything they wanted, right? Those were when Splice was at its best, but it was never because Splice were accelerating. It's because the enemy team couldn't do anything. All those memes they had of that like NA mid laner who's like the anti-carry was what Splice became at a point, but that was never like a jungle thing or even like a fundamental early game thing you guys did well. You're just very good at recognizing compositions in game and how to dismantle them, right?
But that by definition is a good early game.
I think Splice's early game was actually pretty decent, to be honest with you. Like looking back at it, like I think our early game was good. We just really struggled to translate leads into the mid game because we were like really, really indecisive in the mid game.
What did you think was good about your early game then?
It depends. Sorry.
So number one, we had like really, really insane jungle tracking, which is definitely Xerxes' biggest strength as a player in the early game. Like he can almost always tell you where the enemy jungler is. And in a meta like this one, I mean, it's changed like really significantly now because of like shorter camp times, because of Scuttle Crab, maybe there are more camps on the map, etc., etc. So that's like less relevant now. So it's more about getting deep vision in the early game. But like I remember back in like 2018 on like the Odo version of Splice with like Niski and everyone, I would literally like ask Xerxes like, okay, when does enemy Gromp spawn on third clear? And he'd be able to tell me. And he'd be able to tell me like every single camp spawn on the entire map for the next 3 clears. Like he was insane at it. So I think I don't really know that much about what's happening on Origin. On Splice, I think that we didn't necessarily have the most like commanding laners in terms of people who were willing to be like, come bot now and this guy's fucking dead. Which is something that I think he needs as a player. And it doesn't look to me like Origin has that either. I mean, especially if you look at all the mid lane picks they're playing, like most of their drafts for the whole split have been basically like, okay, Alphari, you do some stuff in the early game, like go try and win your matchup. We'll draft you some early game. Bot lane, like pick Nautilus. And mid 2v2, you guys can scale. Like you guys get to play the game at level 9. Like pick Ornn, pick Karthus, pick Azir, pick Sylas, pick whatever it is. Like play the game at level 9, and then we'll see. So I mean, it's really hard for me to say what the limiting factor is there on Origin that's preventing them from playing early game. But I think like Xerxes as a player, if paired with that type of commanding person, like for example, if you paired him with Kazi, who's super good at that type of thing, I don't think it would be a problem.
So you think that everybody around him right now is just kind of encouraging the defensive mindset that he would by default go to?
Potentially, yeah. Potentially.
I mean, OG was the same last year, no? Like, not like Xerxes came in and suddenly the defensive.
Well, OG last year, until Rift Rivals, in my opinion, had the best early game in Europe. And Cold could actually play 4 jungle matchup really, really fucking well. The thing is that the lane, like they played 4 jungle matchup as opposed to play 4 laner acceleration, but all their laners weren't really easy to abuse.
Like Xerxes Olaf is really, really good, for example. It's not a pick that is like, he like loves playing. But I think like actually like if you look back to like UOL days, for example, Xerxes was like a fucking Kayn player, right? Like I remember in 2018 when we first got Xerxes, we literally had to like ban our own Kayn in scrims because we like couldn't lose a game on Kayn because he would be like 3 levels up on enemy jungle every game, right? So like that's something that I think he does fairly well, like playing for jungle. But like if you don't have a mid laner that's willing to play early game prio picks, then that's not going to work, right?
Yeah, like the champions that he plays for jungle matchup on are all scaling farming junglers, including Kayn. Kayn is one of those. Like Kane
Well, I
doesn't
mean,
even scale in until he gets his
Olaf
orbs
is the
for
best
ages.
example, right? Like,
Yeah, the Olaf one surprised me because we've seen Xerxes Olaf this split and it left a lot to be desired, so to say. I think Nidalee would probably be the one that you want to go for then, because Nidalee was the one where they did have a pretty good game there. They actually had all priority lanes, and then they hard invaded Trick and set Trick behind on his first buff, on his first clear. And I remember he actually smited Wraiths away as well because Trick had wasted smite on buff before, so Trick was like monster behind for the entirety of that game. But imagine trying to come back from the level 1 there on Trick as well, and he was kind of playing that one on easy mode. But like his Olaf games this split have left a lot to be desired, so I don't know about that one.
Maybe the split. But I mean, I'm only talking from my experiences of him as a
Sure.
player in the past on Splice, and like maybe Grabbz remembers Gauntlet versus you guys. Was it last year?
No, they weren't in the Gauntlet last year. It must be 2 years ago, mate.
Gauntlet,
Yeah.
Gauntlet 2 years ago.
Well, you got
when
hammered again twice.
Yeah.
twice,
Simon
right?
and us. Holy moly! I will regret that series for my
Thank you.
entire
Actually,
life.
we were
I
so
will
doomed.
regret that
was
record
open.
ban for my entire fucking life, by the way. Like that series was defined by who got Olaf, Tom Kench, and Rise for the first like 3 games, right?
Honestly, it was so funny. Sorry to interrupt, but like I have to tell the story. Like in game 4, I think we got hammered like really late, right?
Yeah. You went second
some
round
reason-
Heimerdinger.
And we're like game 5, like there's no way we first pick Heimer. Like if we don't pick again, then and
I
then
don't know.
after the game, we saw like on your whiteboard, because right now web's not out, right? Because the next day we were there because we played against Shark, I believe. So you had like Heimerdinger ban on 4-5. We were like, yeah, we got it earlier.
I was, but they 2v2 killed them though. They were the only bot lane in the whole of that year that 2v2 killed Kiana and Wadid on Heimerdinger with Jin Tom Kench. So and then Olaf had run all the way across the map. Like Olaf had been like at Herald or something, and then he like ran all the way to bot lane and just killed them. And we were like, "Fuck's sake!"
When you were all describing that, and you were like, "Oh, you know, maybe you just need more proactive, like laners who are going to call when to come, what timing for the gank, and oh, maybe they just let 2v2 skill." You can't just say his fucking name. He's not Voldemort. Like the problem is, Cersei plays with fucking NateDOhDoubleG, and those two. That must be the worst set of enablers in the history of fucking European League of Legends. Veteran, this is another series where like I'm becoming a fucking NateDOhDoubleG atheist. Like I can't handle this guy anymore. It's killing me.
The
Veteran.
reason why, sure, the
He
reason
doesn't want to
why
win. He
I-
just doesn't want to lose and look bad.
Yeah, the reason why I point to the Lee Sin game is because that is the one where I can rationalize that exact point where all the waves are slow pushing anyway. That is definitely not, there's no way that Nigga's going to be like, my waves are slow pushing away from me and they have Trundle on the map. I guess I don't need jungler right now. Like, there's no way that that's happening. Like, anybody who's played with any player ever knows that their player is going to be fucking screaming that they are dead if jungler is not there soon. Right? Like, there's no way that the call is going to be, it's fine, just do your own thing. I don't need shit here. Which is why it shows that I actually think NateDOhDoubleG had a good series here. I think NateDOhDoubleG was also one of the impetuses of why
It's
they
always
were
just
able
good
to
though,
win
mate.
one game out of. Okay, yeah, but he had a good series versus Perks. That's actually
All right.
massive.
I guess if you put it that way, it
First
sounds
game,
better. Sure.
Perks decided to do like the only level 2 trade in the history of Mankind versus an Azir and LeBlanc versus Azir for some weird reason, and gave him a lot of advantages in that way. But I still think that NateDOhDouble's score at the end of the Azir game didn't reflect. There are probably a lot of people like side, like he's back on the NateDOhDoubleG love train, but legitimately, I think he had a really phenomenal series overall. I know that there's the fucking
Yes.
There's the W clip that's doing the rounds on Reddit on the Cassio thing, but he honestly played really well outside of an instance like that in the Cassio game, and that's just going to be the only thing that everyone remembers. Doesn't mean that I'm putting him back up to S tier, but it does mean that he is still comfortably for me an A tier player. His laning phase is still phenomenal, and he played out the 1-3-1 with Renekton really, really fucking well versus Double Global. Though if we get to that game, I think that was more on the way that G2 play out the map that I think is kind of... Huh?
He did Knockdown against us. He played Azir twice, Cassio once, and LeBlanc one game.
The third game, it was LeBlanc Renekton in the 1-3-1.
Oh, yeah, because you said
Because
Renekton.
Alfari was on. It was LeBlanc Renekton 1-3-1. He played LeBlanc that game, but it's a bit more to do with how you guys played with your double globals rather than him. But still, if he's allowed to, he will still play outside laning beautifully. So
let me ask you
I
this,
think he had a really good
Veteran.
series.
If I take his exact performance and I keep that as the one constant, what has to change around Origin to win the series?
Jungle support has to change.
As in the
Why I
players
was
or how
asking
they
about
play
Xerxes.
the game stylistically?
Well, well, technically always the way that they play the game stylistically, I'm just saying it's probably better to cut your losses right now and find a new jungle support rather than expect them to play the game stylistically better. Like the way Upset's playing lane right now is not the way he played lane when Shulker was starting to do really, really well. And maybe some of that's because of...
insane.
Yeah, like maybe some of that is... Well, maybe some of that is because Ignite is one of the only way is forward kind of people, and so that forced Upset like on his leash. But that does mean that you can fix Upset by fixing the support that he is paired with, right? That does mean that that is actually a viable opportunity, and we do have historical precedence for that, rather than bringing in Trick, who's on the last team Ignite was on, and emphasizing all the bad aspects of the playstyle that they were doing. But there's a sunk cost fallacy at this point. I know that this team can play early game really, really well. So I don't think the sunk cost fallacy is with the solo laners. Like Alphari and NukeDuck have played in teams where their early game has been their biggest strength, including on this Origin team very fucking recently. It's just they don't have Cold anymore and they don't have Miffy anymore. Those guys are two of the smartest fuckers in the entirety of League of Legends. So yeah, I think they need to replace jungle support. I still don't buy that NukeDuck is just like a passive will do nothing mid laner. He's just never been like that, and he still isn't like that. We've had whole splits where he's not like that, but people just conveniently forget them.
Any thoughts on NukeDuck, gentlemen?
I was never on his hype train, but I think he's a good mid laner. For some veteran always says how he beautifully plays the side lane, but maybe it's also because I have the bias from actually also playing against the best teams in the world, and then that's not right. No, what I mean though, it doesn't stand out to me because I not only knew, but he's for sure a good player, and I also agree that support jungle is an issue, not only because of how they play the game, but these are the two players who are what they're gonna pick, and it always feels like they play only two champions, and that's all they can do. It's not good for the team if the opponent can ban Gragas on that side and you first set jungle. That's not good ever. Same thing as if we know Nautilus is coming every single time it's open, it's not good for them either, no matter how good they think the champ is, because it just makes drafting easier. When we played against Origin the first time, I think even said in PGL that we ban Gragas against Xerxes, and then suddenly he's less of a player. So I think that's a big issue. But back to NukeDuck, I think he's for sure one of the top mid laners in Europe still. And I think, as Veteran said, him playing passive could be him, but more likely it's the team environment he's in, forcing him to play that way instead of playing trading all the time, right?
But you do have to bear in mind. You have to bear in mind that when we say top, this does mean NukeDuck is fifth, by the way. Because
what the fuck? Are you guys for real?
Wait, but yeah, I am for real, because it still means that he's a really phenomenal player. The standard of mid lane in Europe is actually really high right now.
Right, so what you're telling me is that the fucking third best or fourth best team has the fifth best mid laner, and you think that's good in Europe?
Okay, you have to bear in mind that means, for me, there are 3 A's, 1S, and 1S and 1S plus mid laner in Europe right now. So... it's that, I have all of them crowded up there.
Then you literally just described to me that he is not at the top. You know what the word top is? Top doesn't mean I'm 3/4 of the way up the tree. It means I'm on the tree. Therefore, you would have one top player. It would be the S plus.
Well, he's in the top. Well, he's in the top.
In the top
half,
5. So okay.
He's in the top half of the region, so he's still in the top.
You are an Origin fan. You've just become one. It's all right to lose because NukeDuck's pretty good.
I've been very openly an Origin fan. I've been very openly.
Yeah, I'm saying it as an insult, a derogatory comment. You're cool with them losing this way.
I suppose you've lost over him, or.
Yeah, I've lost in Febiven and Perks and Nemesis over him.
Actually, to a Febi, so.
Febiven is my S and Perks is my S plus. Febiven, I think, is the second best mid laner in the whole region right now. So NukeDuck has still dropped for me.
A lot of heavy lifting is Febiven.
Febi?
Oh yeah. But I feel like he's always been doing that, and it's only getting recognized now because now it's really obvious because they started actually winning on his back at a point when Razork stepped up as well. So they're the winning mid jungle other than just a winning mid. And then when they started declining again, people still remembered Febiven, right? But I think Febiven was like this on last year's Misfits Stories. The most consistent player on that team by far. But he was getting the NukeDuck treatment, right? Because people will be like, well, he's not really doing anything, is he? Well, yeah, the whole fucking map is like is on fire. What is he supposed to do? Go and get himself burned every time? There was an Irelia game where they were literally 0-11, and I remember he still found really strong roam timings to snowball top and bot. It's only top actually, but yeah, I think he's always been this good. But for me, like the gulf between like Loss and Nemesis NateDOhDoubleG is really slim. So to try to put them into like B or C would be really. I mean, it would.
No, that's not the contention. Listen, I'm fine with that part. I agree. That part's so debatable, and obviously then it becomes about who's got what teammates and what is the meta right now. My point is this: is you're making it sound like he's not that far from the people above him.
I mean, he's not that far, but that still puts him top 5 because there's a lot of people who aren't that far. Which is why I brought up again that the gulf between those 3 is like very slim, right? So any one of them could be top 3 right now. For me, it's Larson, but any one of them could be top 3 right now. So yeah.
Let's just put it this way: is Nuke a player I can imagine winning a championship from being good? I would say yes. Like if Nuke wins Split, I would not say, "Oh, what Nuke is LEC champion." I would not be surprised. Like in the way where I say he is a player would probably deserve to be up there. So that's top player in my.
Okay, I'll put it another way.
I think ranking players in like a top, like this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3 is like really, really, really arbitrary and like.
That's the point, mate. That is literally the point. Is you want to know.
The conversation that we've just had about NateDOhDoubleG is he would look way better if he was with a different jungler and support, right?
Yeah.
So, you can have a player that has weaknesses that are then therefore like massively boosted up and hidden, and their strengths emphasized by different teammates, even if they are not a in isolation, in a vacuum, top 1, top 2, top 3 player, and that player can still win a championship, right?
Yeah.
So but I mean,
but we're talking about in the isolation.
Sure, I mean, but it's like talking about
vacuum is always bad to talk about.
Talking about anything in a vacuum is really, really stupid.
It's really pointless. Yeah, I agree.
The only way that you can evaluate it is like how adaptable is this player to different situations, right? And clearly in a situation where you have like a jungler who's not willing to force the tempo of the game, NateDOhDoubleG isn't like able to shine as much, and that's the only thing that we can really conclude from this.
So this. Right? Okay, so this is going to start to get into like the arguing about whether or not it's worthwhile talking about. This is not a conversation I thought that we were ever going to have here. But you can't make a statement like that unless you are aware of how good he is in the vacuum. Because if you don't know how good he is in the vacuum, then you don't understand the things that you have to add or subtract on his teams for him to actually shine as a player. So yes, it is good to have these conversations about how they are in a vacuum. Because when you have them in a vacuum, you start understanding when you take them out of the vacuum, the right environment to take them into. So yeah, I actually do think it is worth having these conversations. Rating and ranking themselves are just for clicks. Yes, rating and ranking themselves are just for clicks. But
and also to know what the person thinks, to know, where do you, like, which quality do you prioritize if it's between these 2 players and there's the one tiebreaker, where do you come out on it? Because then it shows us how you think about the rest of the game.
Actually, that is actually true. So yeah, I actually take back that statement because honestly, we won't have a good basis for which have the rest of the conversation if we're not able to talk about them in a vacuum either, because then we'll understand the difference between how we see a player in its entirety.
Because I'll loop this back in.
Talking about their strengths and weaknesses is super important, right? But,
of course.
I feel like putting like this player is number 6 and this player is number 5, like it is really, really, really impossible to do without more context. Like you can very easily say like this player is insane at this and is the best at this or is the worst at this or whatever. But like
laning could work because laning you can objectively quantify, but like going into mid game, I think it's just really hard because like you don't the discussion where like people there are people who don't even see that mid lane is not mid lane is mid jungle always, right? So even that already starts. So we can see how he controls his wave, which he does really well.
Yep.
Right? NateDOhDoubleG is really insane at manipulation. Therefore, that we can say is a good mid laner. Everything after that in the game, it's hard to quantify because we don't know what is the support saying, how's the jungle pathing, is NateDOhDoubleG calling for the correct things, what gets ignored, is he not, That I think that's also the point that it's really just hard to.
Yeah, we can definitely say his tendencies in certain situations over time, though, because especially with NateDOhDoubleG, he's being a variety of junglers, right? So we know how he'll react to a much larger amount of situations. It's a lot harder when it's a rookie, right? Which is why very often you'll have me like go really ham on rookies and then drop Finn towards B or C tier, right? Because sometimes it doesn't really work out once you get a larger sample size and you figure out that some things that were his strengths weren't actually his strengths because of that, and you get more and more things added on. But I have to construct that idea of Finn in terms of how Finn is if nothing else is added, right? I still have to construct that. I do agree that, like, to an extent, where you rank them is for clicks and stuff, but I also do agree with Thorin that where you rank them off against each other, which inevitably will be a numbers thing, is pretty good to know where your disagreements are with another guy and where you actually end up prioritizing like what is and isn't good about them, right? Like you, for example, prioritize that Xerxino's jungle camp timings, and as a result, and has a decent idea of where enemy jungler probably is, like really highly. That would probably be different to what Grabbz values from a jungler, because he seems to value Jankos' ESP. That's the thing that keeps being brought up, is that Jankos knows when his laners are about to have a happy time, and his parving always accounts for that sort of thing, right? Jankos downloads the personalities of his teammates, right? It's two completely different things. It's really good to have those conversations, and then we're talking about not how they are with others, but how they are essentially in a vacuum. And given that Jankos has this tendency, does that overlap with other players? And that's how you start constructing a really good roster, right? Which is something Misfits will never do. For example, because they never talk about players in the vacuum. As a result, they ended up assuming that the strengths and weaknesses they saw of players were strengths and weaknesses that translate elsewhere, because they don't talk about them in the vacuum. They just talk about like Rock's Gorilla, right? Why is Rock's Gorilla and Rock's play so good together? Well, to understand that, you have to talk about them in a vacuum, right? And they never had those conversations. So this is not something I thought we were ever going to discuss here.
To bring it back to the point I was about to make, though, which is what I want to ask, is this. Is I actually find the origin story for Spring 2020 incredibly boring. And I'm not saying that just because of the meme of how they supposedly play, etc. In as much as when you saw the roster, it was never going to win the LEC. When you saw them play, it was never going to win LEC. When you saw them play Fnatic and G2, it was never going to beat Fnatic and G2 and win LEC. And then when they went to the playoffs, where did they finish? I mean, if Mad Lions hadn't have upset, I'd suspect they would have maybe finished third or fourth, which is where they're going to finish now, and that's it. So it's actually about one of the most fucking boring stories, that you saw the train leave the station, you knew where it was going, it took exactly the amount of time you thought it'd take. At the end of that, it arrived at the station on exactly the right time, and there was never any chance of any other thing happening in terms of beyond like odd game moments what could have turned something in this series here. And the reason why that's boring to me is because the discussion around the team is whack. It's like every player's either good enough or not bad enough to cut. And no one has the balls to just put themselves out there. So everyone I noticed in the last few weeks of the split even stopped memeing on Destiny. They're like, well, he had an all right game on Thresh. It's like, all right isn't good enough if you want to be the LEC champions. Like, what is this skill? This is anyone who does that analysis, get the fuck out of the scene right now. We don't need you to tell us why a player on a top 3 team in the region is all okay to have like the 6th or 8th best player at his position. It doesn't make any sense. That logic, you'd have to have an amazing way of like looping that back into your team stylistic narrative for that to be acceptable. So the reason why I bring up the NateDOhDoubleG case is you've got to attack this on one side or other of the horse. It's either the horse's head, like the superstars aren't good enough. If you guys love NateDOhDoubleG and Alphari, cool, we'll lock them in. Who are we putting around them then? Because if they are good enough, some of the people around them aren't good enough. Or the team's badly coached, or the team doesn't know how to play their win conditions. It's got to be one of these factors. It can't just be like, well, they're all right in most areas, and they lived happily ever after in 3rd place with all the bronze that they could ever fit in the fucking vault.
Maybe it's all of them.
Well, that's almost as good as if we ranked them 1 by 5, right? Listen, mate, you've got a career on that fucking EU40 as soon as you're finished coming, fourth yourself. You've lined up for you. You speak English, got an English accent, and you hear actual, hypothetical discussions. So you're going to fit right in there.
To be fair, I think also we're living in a world where it's just really hard to be a championship contender if you're not coaching for Fnatic.
I will say as well, by the way, one factor that unfortunately no one can mention in their analysis, because, I mean, some of you might not even know this, is that Origin has nowhere near the money of G2. Well, I won't even say Fnatic, because fuck that myth that still exists. They don't have anywhere near the money of G2, anywhere near the payroll of G2. And I can tell you that right at this second, they absolutely cannot afford to go and buy really good support or jungle. That's not going to happen right now. So they are basically hamstrung in that sense. They're going to have, even if they replace Destiny, it would have to be like a National League player as far as I can tell.
And the support pool is also really, really, really rough in Europe.
No anymore. Gistic, also Kaiser was available, which you guys got.
Kaiser's the best.
Pretty good player.
I mean, you can
replace.
replace.
Like Denick, right?
Denick is also good.
If you could get him.
I think definitely
Lavrov is still out there. Doke looks really good right now. It blows my mind every time I mention his name, but Sir Nukeslot is actually looking good now, and he actually even plays shit like Fresh, which is like it's a parallel universe. Targamas is actually back and that's still out there, and his team collapsed because they had visa issues across the board. Vitality are legit the unluckiest organization of 2020. They have visa issues on their regional league team as well. It's actually insane. Mystiques is still out there somehow, which is like the biggest crime against humanity.
Mystiques is actually really good.
Yeah, he's so good. You can replace half of the LEC right now with rookies support talent. So I actually do reject that notion. It's just not as good as the ADC pool is oddly strong right now. The mid lane pool is always being strong. I actually maintain that when you get to like the A+ level in ERLs, any of those players could at least hold their own versus like 3/4 of the LEC, right? Not going to carry, but all of them could at least hold their own, right? The top pool is really weird right now in Europe, and I would say that is the one that is struggling the most. The top pool at a regional level has suffered a lot recently. Most of the old names that we were thinking were going to be the next LEC players like Shemek, Ice Beasto, etc. aren't playing so well right now. So top pool is the one that, and no one is actually coming up to like take the name for themselves, right? So the top pool is the one that I'm the most worried about in Europe right now, not the support pool. But yeah,
fair comment.
Because here's the other thing, right? Normally, when you look at a team that doesn't succeed, you can say, oh, well, it's just hindsight, and now we know you wouldn't want this player, blah, blah, blah. Like, the problem with this scenario is, like, mate, the players we're talking about, like, Mac, your jungle and support would probably have gone to fucking Origin if they'd have been given the offer by Origin, right?
Oh, yeah.
They could have had your players who would, by the way, in theory, would fix most of these problems.
One of them probably wouldn't, but another one might have. But, yeah.
That's if you assume that Origin's coaching staff is as good as Mad Lions, which they're not.
Well, no, the joke is they aren't. That's kind of one thing I'm implying, mate. Because first of all, for whatever reason, they literally do think it's a meme that Cersei plays the way he plays. And so they recruited him and found that, guess what? That's the way he fucking plays. He is choosing to play that way. No one is making him do that. And then in terms of the support angle, we've already mentioned, Gyotto literally dismissed these players like the Kaisers of the world. Like, he didn't even give a fuck about looking at these guys. He thought he'd found some super duper player from Oceanic region that was going to be awesome. So they let, that's why I say I actually think this one's really different to normal cases. Normally it's just like, you had a bunch of free agents, you picked the wrong one, bad luck, try again next time. They kind of went out of their way to get in this mess. They really thought this was the fucking team.
I'm not defending Gyotto. I'm not doing that, but what I am saying is when you said, like, do we blame the coaching staff? I was thinking of just asking Grabbz, would you ever actually take, like, a coaching offer from Origin, knowing that the only two players they're going to keep is NukeDuck Alfari? And I think immediately Grabbz might tend away from that, but I might be wrong there. Because I
have to... No, the
well, I think upset as well. Yeah, go on.
I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter who they keep. It's more about I talk to the players, and then I realize... is the philosophy they're playing right now the coaching staffs, organizations, or the players? I think that's because I am very vocal about this since like last year even. I really dislike how Origin perceives the game. The same way like old Splice was just very... I mean, maybe you guys, as you said yourself, are just bad in mid-game, so it's not even philosophy. It was just like you guys didn't understand how to play it out. I'm not sure. And the same way I criticize Vitality for doing the same shit over and over again. Like, this is clearly something they agree on. This is not... Like, when I see them play, this is not limitations of players. If they have a Fari, NukeDuck, and Upset, there's no way. They could play more aggressive if they want to. So there's something they agree on after talking to each other and thinking this is the way to play the game out. That means, in a second, either it's the coaching staff who says it, and I mean, Origin for 2 years now is the same team in that regard.
Yeah.
Or it's Nuke, or it's Afari, or it's somebody else, But if I talk to them and I see, okay, those two players think this is the way to play, I would shy away. If I then see, okay, this is not, they want to play more aggressive, then of course I would go there. Like, they're good players. I would love it.
That actually sounds like a very reasonable way to join a team, by the way. I wish more people did stuff like that.
True.
Like, actually basically find out who you're going to be working with, like, on an actual, like, that's... Because think about it, that is the level you're going to be having those discussions with the players on when you join the team. So why not get ahead of it and find out what they think?
I think it's very difficult to go into that team and change the way that the players think about playing the game, which is why I would ask Grabbz if he would, because I know that Grabbz, when he joins these teams, he doesn't just view it as like as like it is now Grabbz team and we're going to do things the way Grabbz wants to do things, because there's also a lot of players will not respond to that well, right? But I think even if GillHoto had a different philosophy, I don't necessarily think that he has like this is also not a flame, because it's not the only thing, contrary to popular belief, that he needs to be a good coach. But I don't think he even has like the game knowledge to articulate his arguments against them as to why his philosophy is better than theirs. And I think that going for that kind of argument with them as GillHoto would probably be a bit, it would be a waste of time. So I think he's kind of trapped there if those players really do think this is the optimal way to play the game. And I think over time it will be very easy to convince him that it is this way to play the game. I'm not saying he's like trapped there and his thoughts aren't his own, but at a point, I think GillHoto is essentially being the mouthpiece for Origin when he goes on shows and says all of this stuff.
He's just there to justify
it
and whatnot and give.
Yeah, he's there to. Yeah. So it's not a complete defense of him, because I think that probably at a point you do want someone to go in there and be like, okay, we should probably do things differently than we are doing. But I think at this point it would have to be a player that did that.
Would have to be like a Mithy type recruitment. As
yeah.
Coach. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Comment on that.
Yeah,
I haven't
go
talked
on.
to the players, so no. I would have need to talk to Afari, new to that upset. Actually, on the human level to like know if it is them or not. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying like it has to come from somewhere, and
yes,
that's a limitation, right? Like not like even if you change that, then I think Xerxes and Destiny could work. You know, it's not necessarily those two that hold Origin back. It's just that factor. Whoever brings it in, I just think holds Origin back, and I don't care who it is. I think that's just the main thing. I don't like the philosophy of play, and I think the players could do so much more. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Right, let's move on then, since Origin's eliminated anyway. Right, let's talk a bit about Mad Lions, because obviously this is going to be in a very interesting matchup. I actually feel, I want to know on your side, Veteran, are you one of these people who, with the way that the Mad Lions games played out after they beat G2, do you just dismiss them and think they're actually going to come third?
No. And I was pretty vocal on this on the last Elitists United, that I think that there were like systemic problems that G2 had, that Mad Lions in a unique position to be able to attack. So I think stylistically there was always there for Mad Lions to be able to beat G2, so to speak. There's been a lot about whether they've only been able to do it because it's online. I think they'd always have the capability to do it, and it would become like an issue of execution maybe if it was offline. But I think that it's really pointless to bring into the discussion, because I think Mad Lions would, if they continued on this form and they still somehow like mis-executed or like lost their balls in a game 5 and Shadow doesn't do the most beast mode play that has thus far been done in playoffs, which is when he just rams into 4 people as Olaf and goes straight for the AD. If none of that stuff happens because it's an offline environment and they lose their testicles or whatever, I think that they would still be a team that would be looking to think, yeah, we can beat G2 in summer for sure, and we'd still be talking about that as a series that Mad Lions like should have won, right? Because you'd be able to at least still see that in the stylistic gameplay there. So I think that they are still a team that should be able to beat G2, depending on the version of G2 that we see. And by the version of G2 we see, I mean, are we going to see a G2 that is dramatically improved from what they showed against Origin? Because their one loss to Origin, I should say, not their loss to Origin. Obviously, they smashed them 3-1, which I was expecting you guys to smash 3-0, by the way. You gave me my only wrong prediction, except for the other time that you gave me a wrong prediction. Showed the same stylistic issues that exposes them to Mad Lions in the mid game, which versus max teams is obviously a very difficult thing to do, you know? So, historic.
If with stylistic issues you mean us just being bad at the game, then I agree.
Yeah, but obviously there are like specific ways you are bad at the game versus specific ways other people are bad at the game, right? So, that specific ways is the stylistic stuff.
Mac, what do you think, mate? Because obviously the interesting thing is, it felt like people either just made it sound like Mad Lions 3-0 G2, which obviously clearly is not the case at all. Or if they're a G2 fan, they just obviously hyper-tunnel focused on that fucking Ziggs moment with Caps at the very end, and we're like, but if that hadn't have happened, you know, so it's like, no one, I don't feel anyone gave a reasonable, like,
but by the way, he played that well, like the session was good.
Yes, I actually, one point that Kazi himself actually made when I had him on a show was, and I went back and looked at this, is the reason people think he misplayed it is because they don't notice at the bottom that the Syndra is coming up, basically, exactly. And you had to do that move, otherwise you would get stunned anyway. He was actually right. Kazi was very fair to even say that. Like, there was nothing else Caps could basically do. So that is kind of a non-point. What do you think?
Also trying to stall time for his passive, though, I think.
Okay. Right, what do you think, though, Mac, of the series overall, and then now having to go against G2 again? Is there any carryovers, for example, from the first series that should apply to the second one?
Definitely. I think in most of the games, the team with like the more like early playmaking was able to win. Like I think we played one really, really hardcore scaling draft where we like contested bot side scuttle at level fucking 2 with Kindred when we like outscaled them in 25 minutes. Like at 25 minutes, the game is literally over. But we contested the scuttle like super aggressively for no reason with Kindred, and then like the game is boom. And even then almost came back in. There's the game 4 where we had like 6k gold lead at 10 minutes, right? And then through the game, in terms of the matchup, like we're really comfortable playing against G2. Like they're a team that we scrimmed against a lot, and like I think we're one of the only teams that's comfortable to like trade champions with them and just like take the skill check basically. Like if you guys want to pick Kalista, fine, you can pick Kalista, right? If you want to pick Syndra, fine, you can pick Syndra and we'll play into it. Like we're the only team that's given them Syndra for the entirety of the split. And like we're just willing to back ourselves and take that trade, which is why we're a good team against them, because like the teams at the very, very top, the way they play the game usually, and like the teams, this is over the last 2 years, like since like they changed slow pushes and the game got way faster and blah blah blah. Like the teams at the top are the ones that are willing to like I always say spit in your face, right? They're willing to walk up on mid wave when their jungler isn't fucking there and be like, I'm gonna get this Prior. Or like when their solo laner is in fog, but he's actually like nowhere near mid lane, right? He's like farming a fucking Krug camp, and they're willing to walk up and be like, I'm gonna take this Prior, like do something about it, right? And we're one of those teams that's willing to call your bluff and like just jump on your face and try and kill you, right? Which is why the series looked the way it did.
All right. Right, Grabbz. Obviously, everyone. This is the lazy narrative version of your route for the rest of LEC. Is this the two teams that you have to beat are in theory the teams that are better than you in the early game, and this will be the problem the whole series. Thoughts?
I don't see it, but I don't think that's the issue. But that's a narrative.
I notice coaches never do see any of the big.
What do you think?
Things, you know?
I really want to know what you think the issue is.
Really? Okay. Here comes. I think the series, the best of 5 from both teams was played really bad. I think both teams did many mistakes in terms of tempo and what weak sets Ramset is. So it was a conflict in what team fucks up more. I'm not sure if you agree or disagree, Mac, but I think like I'm pretty sure if you look back at the games, you're also like, why are we doing this? Like, what are we doing here? Where it should be like glaring issues. Also, one thing that I want to point out to once, because that's how G2 functions, and I think people should know, but they forget, is that we said that we're gonna chill the split, and the players are gonna ramp up, right? Just that's the narrative, right?
Any moment you want to ramp up, just let me know.
But because like we knew the schedule is 9 weeks, 3 weeks of break, and then playoff starts. So we actually had the plan going that because we have those 3 weeks, we don't do like many reviews, we chill a bit more, and then in those 3 weeks we prepare. And then suddenly Corona hits, and we play instantly.
Right, okay.
Shit, guys.
So you're going to kind of have a mini boot camp before playoffs.
I mean, but that's how we always do it. Like that's how G2 always prepares. And it was the same for even last spring, I think. In the last 4 games, we lost 3. Where we then 3-1 and 3-0 at the Origin. Because for playoffs, we ramp up. And we actually like, we do small stuff, for example, that we actually do extra VOD reviews where the players have to present something, let's say, right, the next day, like homework basically, and all this kind of stuff then ramps up, and we didn't have the time for it. That being said, of course, that is never an excuse for the performance we showed. Like, I'm not gonna say that's what we lost. We lost because we were bad. Also, I think that we did not know how we want to play on this patch, was showed in the drafts. And also the way how G2 drafted for 2 years didn't work out either. For example, we really rejected the idea, or still, I kind of hated the idea of the team comp that goes to one thing, which some like, some I dislike. You know, for example, we always, as I said before, when Akali, Strong, Sylas, Ryze, these champions want to be on side, but they can still fight when it's a team fight. So there are different ways to play the game out. If you look at the game 2 draft, I believe, or it's game 3, like we had Aphelios, Fresh, and Aatrox. And we finish it with Elise Sylas, which, like, it doesn't make sense because Aphelios is so strong. If you give him a front line, he can actually fight. But the draft was so bad because we tried again to have these options in game, but that's not how the current meta works.
Okay.
Like in hindsight. So that's also why some drafts are kind of iffy, because we didn't recognize it early enough. Game 5, for example, with the Giga Snowball, we are 3k ahead at 8 minutes, and then, which is also what I'm saying we were bad, and what tempo is that we TP top to defend a play where Perks goes for a wave, he does it to push in the Rumble. Like, I think we're 5-1 or something, we're 3k up. Jarvan is in fucking Africa, not being in the play. Perks goes for a wave, they want to fight him, and Caps TPs in the middle of the wave. Like, oh, take this fight, guys. And we got 4 kills down, and then suddenly we can't snowball anymore. Like, that's also what I mean with being bad. That's nothing to do with how we view the game or what champs we play. We just look at the game in the bad way. And this is something already that even though the series against Origin wasn't perfect, I think looking from Mad to Origin this 1 week, we improved a lot already. Like in mid-game, how we play around mid-priority, where against Mad, Caps was cut out a lot because we didn't talk about what he want to do with the mid-wave. So while he says, okay, let's play for this objective, the team is like, sure. And then he steps up to get the wave and then dies because nobody's following up. So yeah, I just think that a team like Fnatic, which they have really out-Mad, and us should not lose the best of 5. And that sounds very flamey. I just want to say, I was very vocal in the beginning. I think Mad will be, like that's what I said in the beginning of the split, that Mad will be a top team in summer. And I'm really surprised that they're this good so early. But I still don't think that they should beat us if we play like human beings, if that makes sense. Because, yeah, I mean, it sounds very, I know how it sounds. It just...
I mean, that series came down to a shitload of execution moments, right? Like, even game 3, you guys should have won the game 3, right? But like, Caps legit gets one shot on mid lane because Ezreal, like, Q flies through the air and, like, kills him through the lantern and the game's over, right?
Exactly, but that's what I said, right? It's not even the execution, it's that we don't have the mindset to actually talk about what we want to do, because that's an example where Cap says, we want to play for the objective, so he goes for the mid wave. Makes sense, right? But nobody in the team tells him, no, we don't want to do it. They leave him alone, he dies, and suddenly, Caps is inting. Yeah, because we as a team, we don't know what to do. We don't talk about what to do. We're playing bad, you know? That's also what I meant beforehand with, sure, like it looks like Caps is inting, but we as a team just played really bad, and it's hard to explain, and I know it sounds very, oh, we're so fucking good, we just inted, you know? I know how it sounds, but I can't look at the series and then say we played good but just lost.
I've got a question for a based on
having
that.
bad understanding
Can I please?
Where it's really easy to make execution mistakes, right? Like having poor shot calling puts you in shitty positions where you die.
Pretty much. Or not shot calling puts in. Yeah.
I have to comment on this. So the instances where Caps was dying on Affiliates in game 3, he was doing stuff like going for hard resets on mid-wave when there's literally no priority anywhere else out on the map. That doesn't require shot calling at all. That's like a fundamental issue with AD carries on mid-section that I used to call Sven syndrome, and he is still doing that. You shouldn't have to be shot called off of that kind of wave. When it comes to the idea that you got, I mean, obviously no best of 5 is like, there's not a single perfect best of 5 that have been played in the history of mankind. Every best of 5 is riddled with mistakes. The specific differences that you guys have right now versus Mad Lions that put Mad Lions in a unique position is because Mad Lions play really hard for almost every neutral objective on the game, which can be really bad sometimes, but you guys don't play map setups without thinking about specific key neutral objectives and how that will mess up tempo. So for example, the game 5, the thing that you talked about was Perks TP. The biggest thing for me for game 5 when I went over this was when you guys opted to play super heavy to strong side bot on Kallista's rotation to tier 1 because you are technically ahead on tempo then, but then they immediately acquire tempo back by grabbing Herald on top side, and then you lose the tempo lead for most of the rest of the game until we get to the complete fiestas later on. But that was actually the massive turn where suddenly you guys can't go for aggressive plays without being collapsed on. And this is you guys fundamentally misunderstanding the difference in priority of neutral objectives now to what they were last year. Last year, you guys were very defined as a team that played very heavily for lane states in mid game and for tempo around those lane states. That was really good last year and is how you guys ended up destroying Origin, because Origin dogmatically went for every single Drake, and you would trade every neutral for map tempo, and you would always come out ahead of them even when you were losing or not a lowest game composition. But it doesn't work now. Go on.
Then it also goes back to what I said with the preparation time, because if you look at the regular season games we played in both splits, we were not insane. We were just playing, right? And then with the wrap-up time, we actually cleaned up our style in that regard, which was missing, and that's what I mean with playing bad. Like, for example, Matt, I can't say it because you played them, right? I'm just going to type something to Veteran, actually. It's really awkward, I know, but you have to see what I think right now, right? So that makes sense.
It's fine. I mean, people sometimes will type stuff to me during a show. But like another thing that I want to say though is that you said that when you played against Origin, you thought you played like a ton better. But this tendency about strong side play was still there because that's why you guys weren't able to execute the double globals. Because theoretically, what the double globals should do versus the 1-3-1 composition is that the double globals should allow you to be able to fake pressure such that they can't get out pushes on both lanes at the same time, and they will end up losing out on tempo if you juggle mid wave versus side wave. But instead, you guys will have Mickey just run straight towards your strong side of play. And because of that, the fake pressure that Tom should have with his global, it never matters in the entire game. It's the only reason
look what I tapped. Look what I tapped.
Oh, it's so fucked up that he just wrote Jankos is a shit. I can't do anything about it. The fuck?
Shit,
That's
how you
so
know, dude? Tell me
unacceptable.
what.
That's so unacceptable for a coach to say.
It's just like, okay, basically when I tapped to him, there's a specific way that we think Matt plays the game.
Okay.
And that we could and should abuse.
Okay.
We didn't do it because we know it's coming, but we just didn't because we were bad in those games, and that's what I mean by that.
Here's what we'll do, Grabbz, is if you actually beat them and then this actually bears out, we'll reveal it in the most epic way in a future episode, and you were in fact the prophet.
It's not even a big, but it's not even a big thing. It's not even.
That'd be cool though. It'd be a cool little detail.
Sure, but it's like. Again,
I mean, I'm still not going to say what it is that he types in.
Mac, this is how utterly fucking ridiculous the arrogance and hubris of G2 is. They're now, he said before, we're not pretending like we're just really good and we're just fucking around. He's now secretly typing like how to destroy your team to someone else. Or he's pretending he did that. Whichever one it is, that's ridiculous on either end, right?
Okay, no, I'm doing it now. Shit talking. No, I mean, but Mac understands what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's basic things in the game that we should not fuck up if we are good.
Yes.
And we were not good in that series at all. And especially like we always said last year, tempo is so important for G2. We play tempo, right? We play pressure. And we utterly failed in the best of 5 doing that in most situations. And we can say, like, and again, I don't want to take anything away from Alliance.
Sure.
I think that's important to notice that I think they're phenomenal for the time they had together as a rookie team, right? They're insanely good, I think. But they're a rookie team. That means they have certain structures they repeat to ease and like band-aid certain things they have to learn yet because rookies don't have the game experience like somebody like Reckless or Caps or Perks has. So these are things we should be able to attack. Fnatic did attack, and that's why they won 3-0. And that's basically my point. And saying like, as arrogant as it sounds, like a team like ours with that experience should not be a close best of 5 if we play the game because Matt has his natural limitations they won't have in the future. Like I think in the future they're actually gonna be really, really good still. Yeah. And even better now, right?
So I think that was the big difference between playing against G2 and Fnatic for me. Like the way it felt was that like Fnatic were so adaptable in the series, and like whenever we tried something new, they had an answer for it, right? Whereas like I didn't feel like G2 had like enough answers for all of the like stuff that we'd prepared. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, again, I know it sounds very arrogant. It's hard to say because we play them, right? I can't explain what I'm actually thinking about, but I think Mac has an idea of what instances I'm talking about. But we know because we went through these games again, and hopefully on Saturday we can show. And I mean, if we can't do it as a G2 against a rookie team, then we just deserve to like lose and bomb out, and then all hail Fnatic, then fucking well deserved.
By the way, I've got a question for you about the point you said earlier where, like, to be fair, if you had planned to do like a little 3-week mini boot camp and make that when you'd peak for the playoffs, like obviously that did get completely fucked by the scheduling change. Nothing you can do about that. But when you say that, right, I want to clarify this because some people, if they hear that, and especially if you don't win the split now, are going to be like, oh my God, like they're going to think you guys are like double lift basically, that you just wanted to like mail it in, you weren't trying, like you just, when you say that, is that something more along the lines of like it does appear like your team is one where psychologically the team wouldn't really respond well to being like drill sergeanted every single week and having to put matter. And did they need like a little bit of a breather in that sense? And then you have to work them hard at the right time. What's the thinking behind that?
It's just about, okay, the year is very long if you go towards someone to win Worlds. And I think it always sounds like a cop-out, right? But if you look back last year in spring, Fnatic was basically the same roster with Nemesis instead of Caps. And their spring was really bad in the beginning, right?
Sure.
Like they went 0-7. And that also goes with motivation. It's really, really hard. And I know it sounds really bad. And people say, they're pro players. They should always be motivated. Yeah, the human beings. That's not how it works. That's legit not how it works. I think we were like still depressed from World Finals when we started bootcamp. That's just how human
Yeah,
thinks.
of course.
And so the idea was basically that we, like in the arrogance that we have, or the cockiness, which is fair to say, we knew we can be a bit more relaxed in the beginning, and we probably will still end up first or second. And we thought in our head, it doesn't matter if we're first or second, we will get there just by being in G2. And then for playoffs, we're going to have this time where we actually like, we also like, as a sort of viewers can understand a bit better, we have different segments of those 3 weeks where we practice different stuff. For example, the first period of time, they can try whatever they want. The second, then we know what we want to play, and then we refine our play style. The third, we actually practice against our opponent, right? Like very broadly spoken. And that takes 2 to 3 weeks. So then it's this is my failure as a coach to not adapt our week 8 and 9 practice, knowing that we're gonna not have this 3 week break, right?
Yeah.
Because week G2 could have said, okay, guys, we don't have this time. Let's try to flip the switch now and actually prepare for playoffs. We didn't do it. And then it's my failure to expect of human beings to like, now you're playoffs. That's not how it works,
Sure.
right? You can't just suddenly say, go try hard now. So that's my mistake. And that's also why we lost against Mid-Lions. And I stand by that. That's fine, right? But yeah, like I think for a team like us, especially like, you know the players and people like Caps, Jankos, Mickey, Wanda, even Perps, they're all like happy-go-lucky guys.
Yeah.
They want to have fun. They like, as I said, right, I could not be a strict Korean coach telling what to do. This would never work. Never.
Sure.
So they need their freedoms. And then at the same time, we talk about when we take those away, in a sense, to prepare for something. And that's what the 3 weeks were for. And we lost those. I failed to adapt in the structure. And now, like as I said, I think we improved a lot already from Mad to Origin, even though, we say that we played bad against Origin to an extent, which I agree on.
Sure.
But even that was a jump, and now we make another jump from Origin to Mad again. If that's not enough to actually beat Fnatic, who were hungrier than us, because, we felt the same way last year. Fnatic went to World Finals, and they won the splits, and we're like, we want to beat them, Like every single week, beat the new roster.
Sure.
Even though we still had fun, that was the motivation.
Yeah.
And now we were there going saying World Finals, we could have won everything. We're kind of like bumped a bit. We want to relax a bit. And Fnatic is like, they won both splits. They were World Finals. We want to get there. We want to beat them. We have something to prove. So in that regard, I think we were just like missed the timing of actually ramping up. And again, like, sure, fans can be angry and say they're professionals, they should always try the hardest, but that's not how it works.
Also,
there's a reason why. Can I just finish?
Yeah.
There's a reason why there's something called peak performance, because it's the peak. You're not meant to maintain that form for a long time.
Yes.
Like in every sport ever, the teams ramp up their practice to a big event because they know, like, a human is not on his best form all the time. That's the same we think. And we took liberties, and if we lose, then we fucked up, and that's also my fault, because then we had too many liberties. But if we don't, and we suddenly win worlds because we're refreshed, then it was worth it, We're not going to know until the end of the year if this was all good or not. This is our bet of trying to, like, be fresh for summer and be fresh for worlds, which you weren't last year at worlds. So that's basically the whole idea.
Like, one thing I would say is, like, I was actually going to make a similar point to what you said at the end there. If you actually just look around top sportsmen, even people in esports, like, for example, the people who play the 1v1 games, Quake and StarCraft, where obviously you have no teammate can carry you if you're having a bad week, you just lose the tournament. Those guys, when they practice, sure, they might tell fans in interviews they practice 10 hours a day. They don't. What they all do, literally, is they pick the tournament they want to peak for. The champions I'm talking about here. Because I've heard so many stories from players who bought the angle that you just practice all day, every day if you want to be the best. And what they say is that, yeah, you know what, because you really want to beat this one guy who you've never beaten, you finally beat him at like the third to last tournament in the circuit or whatever, and then he just beats you at the finals because that was when his peak began. He'd have started ramping up, say, the second to the last tournament or something like that. So I also think it's so based on personnel. Like, as I say, if you had a different set of players, for example, if you have a bunch of rookies, maybe they want to practice all the time. Maybe that's the dream for them, to get as much game knowledge as much, let's get ahead in that sense. But if you've got veterans as well, the odds that all 5 of them are going to want to grind all day long, every day for a whole year, like you say, because obviously the circuit keeps getting extended, the more success you have. I can certainly see how with some teams that would be completely the wrong approach. You might burn them out halfway through the year.
And it's also worth saying, I think, that like the drop down from Worlds to Spring regular season, like in terms of like the amount of like importance and also the amount of fun is just so big. Like, this is something that Humanoid said to me, like when we came back to this regular season, he was like, fuck man, it's a whole year till Worlds. like, oh my god, like we have to play like regular season best of ones in front of a really small crowd, and like it's just like not as hype, right? So you don't get the same like adrenaline rush and the same kick to go for it and to be super motivated. And like managing that level of not demotivation, but like keeping things stable and keeping a like lighter approach throughout the year is something that we for sure do as well. Like we've taken a bunch of like a lot of time off, even though we have a super young roster. Normally people think that rookies are like, you know, grind 100 games of solo queue a week and like never get tired and that type of thing. Like that's not really the way we see it at all. And like the way we see it is that we have like 4 players who are super new to this, right? They have to change their lifestyle. They have to move to a different country, and except Kaiser. But even so, like move away from like his family home, right? They have to like make all these adaptations to their diet. We make them do meditation. We make them go to the gym all the time, right? There's like overwhelming, huge amount of change to their entire lifestyle. And like if you push that all on them at the same time, and then are like, go play 60 solo queues a week, like, and do 4 scrim days, and then 2 days a week of LEC, like they're going to burn out, right? So this is something that we've done as well. Like a lot, this split is taken time to have like quality time and to have rest time and to have low pressure type training environment so that we can peak at the right time.
I like that angle though. You make them learn meditation, because then obviously when they have that profound moment of enlightenment where they realize that we are all one, then you can just tell them, well, technically we're all playing weak side. Now get the fuck in that top lane and give me all the picks.
Jesus.
That's good. You're taking the Eastern approach. I like that. Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift to talking about Fnatic then. It's the one team left to talk about. But I actually like that you brought up that angle though, Grabbz, because here's the problem. That storyline's brilliant if everything's the same as last year, mate. If you're the Super G2 who ultimately won't be beaten, if you get your prep time and you get your chance to peak and, you know, you've got the great players, and if the role swap all works out, that's all brilliant. But the problem is this, mate. This Fnatic team's fucking good. Like, I don't even know if it's a foregone conclusion last year's G2 would beat this Fnatic. I would have been very interested to find out. So sadly, we won't find out at this point in time, and it'll have to be a different G2 who does it. So what do you think of the current Fnatic? Because this isn't the same Fnatic you played last year, mate.
I think they're good, but maybe it's also because I have more experience on screaming them. And
they just look better on stage?
No, okay. I'm going to say it. They're a really good team. They're a world-class team, right? Like, no question about that. I think they could compete with any team. But for example, I don't see anything where like, wow, this is something we can replicate, or wow, they're so good at doing this. Where what really like a better team than us should have. Could also be, again, I mean, to be fair, and I think I don't tell any secrets, scrimming in Europe, and especially with G2, or like, especially if G2 and Fnatic scrim each other, are very bloody. Like, they rarely get to an actual productive game because 10 players have their egos and they're like, I'm gonna fucking show you I'm better than you. So maybe also I don't experience the Fnatic that they show against other teams, right?
Right.
And I think it is fair to say that we're like very similar to each other. Let them be a bit better right now, like from last week. I know we lost against Mad Lions, and I mean that's what people suddenly said Fnatic looks better. But against Origin, they also could have lost the 4th game. And the 2nd game, if Xerxes actually finds his hands and hits the X on Reckless on bot, and they kill Senna there, they push out the wave, and Origin has a Giga lead with Azul. Just saying, right? It's not like Fnatic cruised against Origin as well. So there are weaknesses. And I think they're very similar, but again, I don't see the narrative that they're so much better. I know that, okay, it's also, again, I'm biased because I know we fucked up so many things.
No, you're doing a great job playing defense. Keep going.
Not so defense. Like, honestly, in the end, we don't care, right? We don't care if we lose against them, if we beat Mad Lions, first of all. Then so be it. Then they were better on the day. Like, but I had way different feelings going into games against, let's say, Damwon, SKT, and FPX at Worlds, for example. Like, just in terms of how good they actually are, in terms of what they do different than us. I mean, sure, you can laugh, but...
No, I just remember the scrim results of against like one of those teams was like a massive... people were betting...
Okay, no joke. After the group though, I just messaged Carlos, we're flying home, by the way. Like I actually thought when I get 0 feet by
I bet all in on you guys. I just want to say that. Like I believed. I fucking knew it was no way. So
I mean that you believe more than us, but sure that worked out. What I'm saying is, again, I don't want to discredit Fnatic. I'm not saying they're not a good team. They are a really good team.
They're just not exceptional.
I don't see anything that makes them special.
Right.
Even self-made, who like is an upgrade over Broxah, is because I think they changed up their not patterns, but how they approach the early game. But there's also a system to it. There's also something they always do. You can play towards, and it's not like they auto win the game by doing that. Even against Mad Lions, even though they're 3-0'd, but I mean, ultimately you can say the Malphite pick was insane because I didn't know that you can just one-shot their Theos with 1.5 items. Because by that point, Mad Lions was 3k ahead, and if Shadow doesn't, for some reason, clear what he shouldn't clear, then Matt also can win that game, right? So it's not like Fnatic has this really insane early game all single time where they get Giga ahead. They are good in wave control. They are good in rotations. They're good at everything. They're a really good team. But I don't see them as a clear favorite because they're so insane. So I think it's going to be an interesting match. We could lose. But we don't see them as an opponent. We're like, shit, this will be like, this is not possible, or it's harder than any other international team. If that makes sense. Like, we just don't see them as this super strong EU team where they're clearly better than us. We just don't see it. Yeah.
Some would say your job relies upon you not being able to see that, though. You have to believe there's a chance. You have to think there's a way to beat them. You have to look at any flaw they make and think it's replicable and you can attack it.
Like, I just want to know where it comes from, because if it comes from us losing against Mad Lions and then beating them 3-0, then...
Let's do this then.
You know?
Veteran,
I just want to know that. Exactly.
Veteran, what's the best case for Fnatic as the best team, and does it in any way... Is it affected by the playoff run?
So for me, the difference between Selfmade and Jankos and Fnatic early game and G2 early game is that Selfmade is absurdly good at juggling lane priorities early, absurdly good at juggling slow push scenarios properly, such that it's basically impossible to find openings versus any Fnatic team without giving up a significant amount of tempo in their early lane setups. At the same time, their drafts right now, when it comes to early game, are pertained around making up numbers advantage in every single lane that as much as they possibly can, either through priority or through other stuff like their TP on Hylissang on bot with Senna now, right? But even then, they'll actually juggle Reckless into midsection really fucking well. And then it's not necessarily a question of if they are efficient with that juggle of priority. It's the fact that even if they don't do a proper acceleration play on that, or even if they mess up on that, you as the team against them can't get tempo over them because of that fuck up, because they have held so much priority on the map for that shift. So they can do that, do nothing, go back, and worst case scenario, they're just winning as hard as they were before, which may be incremental, but that's the way that their early game works right now. The issue of Jankos, and this is also an issue that he had versus Shadow, is that Jankos isn't as good at juggling lane priorities as Selfmade is, and versus Shadow, and you brought up earlier that you think that all of the early game stuff came down to misexecution, and you, Mac, brought up very specifically that you guys shouldn't contest bot scuttle in game 2. The big issue in the game 2 is that even though G2 got the early invade on red buff, if Shadow doesn't recall and instead recognizes that the next scuttle that's coming up will have the mark on it, and you do know that for a fact if you're Shadow, him recalling there at all was just really strange to me. If he moves there's actually no way that Jankos can head him off onto that scuttle. He grabs the scuttle, then he moves into resets. There's no way that they can go for a deep invade there. He's actually completely fine for the rest of the game, and then G2's early invade probably doesn't really amount to that much. G2's early game
also just not start on red buff, right? Because they can only late invade on one side of the map.
Yeah, that's true. That's the thing, though. That's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing, though. There are a lot more options when you look at the way that early game goes on the side of Mad Lions than it is for side G2. Now, part of that is drafting. We are talking about a team that basically made its name in the second half of the split, going for Olaf Tarek every fucking game that they possibly could, right? Obviously, some of that is down to drafting, so they have a bit more options. But they are insanely good at juggling this in a way that G2 aren't, outside of one very specific area of the map. But that comes down to individual play that is a little bit easier to fix, rather than a team-wide understanding or a jungle understanding of how to play out early game. And I think Fnatic will retain this advantage over G2. I think that Mad Lions basically playing only for this so that they can go for sole win condition as fast as humanly possible, and now drafting specifically for this as well, will still retain an advantage in this aspect over G2. I think this made OG uniquely vulnerable to Mad Lions and Fnatic in a way that they aren't uniquely vulnerable to G2, but also means that Origin can't do anything against G2 at the point where you do have to do something against them, right? And these issues have nothing to do with whether or not Fnatic is doing well in playoffs or not, because this is stuff that was already present in the regular split. I actually thought Fnatic were going to beat G2 in the second game the entire week leading up to it. That was what I was saying. Until the draft happened, and the moment the draft finished, I immediately switched to G2. But stylistically, I thought Fnatic were just a lot better than G2 at points where G2 is actually being historically pretty vulnerable. And the last thing I want to say is because I saw a tweet from you, Thorin, recently where you quoted when Fnatic said last year that a meta does not define Fnatic, and you said 2020. I think the meta since the 10.3 patch has been the perfect meta for their players. Like, this is the perfect Bwipo and Nemesis patch, right? And I do think that there are other metas where the current strengths that they are able to show will not then mask mid to late game issues that they actually still retain, that G2 are uniquely placed to actually beat them on. Yeah, because when it comes to juggling tempo and priority mid to late game, G2 is still one of the best teams in Europe at that. Even if I think there's a very specific thing that they are lacking right now, with regards to their neutral objective priority, I do think that that is an area where if Fnatic get away from a point where their drafts can be this strong based around their players, I think G2 will comfortably beat them in summer. But yeah, I do think the meta really favors them.
I think I know the 2 points to talk about, and we can talk about after you want. But this is something that was addressed this week. And also comes down to, I mean, it's pretty obvious it was talk about bot lane, right, and how bot lane controls waves. I think at this point it's not like a secret that, like, for example, Fnatic has a very specific way of controlling bot waves in terms of how Hylissang trades HP and how Selfmade paths around that, right? This is not a secret. And that's also what I mean, though, that it's good. But, okay, it goes again back to what I said earlier, that we as G2 were a team that was more solo lane focused, and when like these duelist champs are good, it's our meta, right? And also that caps until recently, and what we tried from Mad to Origin, which went way better, we didn't play towards him in a way where he actually can take control of how waves are being played out. So I think that's also something that will change in our series against Mad and Fnatic. And I mean, this is obviously from watching Origins games, so it's not like I'm telling any secrets about how we approach the game. But that's also what I meant earlier, that Caps, like, we never really played around him. That's also why the bot states were not always that good. That's something we're addressing. And that's how Fnatic mostly gets the leads, right, by unlocking Hylissang. So that's also what I meant again by saying they're good, but it's not where I'm like, I can't understand how they're doing it, right? It's very clear that they're good at it, but it's not going to be something that we get caught off guard in any means or in any scenario, right? And that's what I meant by saying that I don't think they're that insane, like, compared to us. Like, we know what they're going to do, or like, we assume we know what they're going to do. They probably think the same, and then that's why I say both teams are kind of a similar level. But first of all, we have to bet mid-lines, right? I don't want to, like, say this is a free win.
Yeah.
Before it sounds like me saying, oh, we play Fnatic.
Yeah, of course.
We are aware that Mac comes first, right?
What do you think, Mac? What are your thoughts on this Fnatic team?
I think Fnatic is actually super adaptable right now. I think the changes that Mithy has had on the way that they've played the game, on the way that they've started to change their philosophy on how they prioritize side lane pressure has been really, really interesting. And I think it makes them a much more, like, multifaceted team than they necessarily were last year. I also agree that the meta change has been, like, insane for Bwipo and even for Reckless as well, right? Like, there were like 3 new champions that came into the meta on ADC, and Reckless now plays all 3 of them, right? Like, previously, 3 new champions would come into the meta on ADC, and Reckless would be like, I'll play one of them for like a week, and then I'll go back to Tristana, you know? Whereas, like, he actually plays all of the meta champs right now, so they can just, like, first rotate his champion, whatever it is. Like, they don't have to save, like, counter pick so that he can pick Sivir or Tristana anymore. Like, they can literally just, like, pick Aphelios or pick Senna or pick MF in first round, or even Ezreal if they have one, and then just, like, and then they can actually counterpick for their other roles in the rest of the draft. So their draft has gotten way, 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 way stronger. And that allows a lot of, like, extra expression for people like Nemesis and Bwipo, who are, like, these kind of specialist type players, right? Who have this really, really, like, specific niche playstyle. And they, like, innovate a lot of weird champions around that playstyle so that they, like, basically they always know the matchup better than you, because they're always playing either something weird or something in a way that other people don't play it.
Sure.
So I think it's a really, really, really strong meta state for Fnatic right now. And I mean, I think in our series against them, like, Fnatic played better than G2 did, which is, like, pretty fair to say. But I think we also played, like, a lot worse against them than G2. Like, our a lot of the things that we've learned over the course of the split have been from watching Fnatic. So maybe we put them on a pedestal a little bit, and I think that pressure showed. And so we weren't really the same Mad Lions as we were against G2 when we played against Fnatic.
Do you see why people contrast your team and theirs?
For ours and Fnatic?
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, like, bot lane centric, top lane playing weak side, right? Like, it's a fairly similar comparison, but I think the way that we play...
Humanoid and Nemesis are so different, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
the way
are.
we play mid jungle is like completely different to the way that they play mid jungle. But
I think the reason why the contrast is
so
happening.
different.
Sure. The reason why the contrast is happening now, I think, is just because when we look at like U3 teams, like it's really easy to say, all right, well, Fnatic can take on Mad Lions because their strengths are kind of localized in the same area, rather than it being specifically your teams behave the same, right? Fnatic are really good at not allowing you guys to get any of the neutrals that you really love and love skirmishing around, and have historically been your biggest strength. Whereas, you know, G2 are really good in the mid to late game scenarios, so Fnatic are like a bit weaker, right? But you theoretically will counter G2 because, you know, you guys have really good early games. There's like a triangle going on here. You know, I think that's what people are contrasting, rather than the specific manners in which you are strong early versus Fnatic are strong early, right? I'd never characterize them like you, outside the fact that you guys are strong at a similar time period.
Yeah, fair enough.
Do we have a last topic, or should we just leave it there? Is there any last burning topic, Veteran?
No, I mean, no. I got like 1/3 through my like issues with G2, but I feel like I should find something to say about Mad instead if I was to find something. I mean, when it comes to you guys, I do want to ask because you guys, I've said it like 3 times already in the show, but you guys do heavily prioritize neutral objectives, right? But then there was a point where you guys were doing that while you had like Victor v Tristana, right? And you should just be scaling into items, but you're still contesting every single Drake, and you are still kind of this team. But did you guys just eventually get your drafts aligned with that, or like what was the conversations that was going on? Like while you were drafting this way, but then playing away where you'd kind of favor, you know, the usual low left Alex.
I won't listen for like 5 minutes. Don't worry. I'm just talking. It's fine.
So,
Good question, Veteran. Good question.
I'll say that we had actually a fairly big playstyle change in the middle of the split, where. So coming into the split, right, I have 4 rookie players and Humanoid. And Humanoid is like really, really good on a lot of the kind of side laning late game champions. Like he's fucking insane on Azir. He's really good on Ryze. He's really good on Kiana. He's really good on Akali. Like all of these types of champs, right? He's a very good side laning mid laner. As a team, like if you're coming into a split with a bunch of rookies, like it's going to take a long time to develop the amount of consistency required to play like a full court press early game playstyle, right? Like if I go and draft us 3 lanes of prio and a winning jungler, like there's a pretty decent chance that with 4 rookies and like Marek, who's been in LEC for 1 year, that we're going to go and like get an early game lead, maybe not, and then throw it,
Sure.
right? So that being the case, like what we worked on for the first 8 weeks of the split, maybe even more, was like these are the fundamentals of the game. Like this is how you use tempo, this is how you use pressure, this is how you use deep vision, and like this is how you like keep like transferring pressure and permeating that like cycle of not permeating, that was the wrong word, but like continuing that cycle of like using pressure to create tempo, to create vision, and transferring pressure, and blah 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 blah. If you like, because we trained that so much, that meant that basically a lot of our wins in the regular season came from just outscaling bad teams for free, because we were really, really good at pushing side lane pressure around the map. However, that's actually not the main strength of my players, right? My players are super aggressive, really mechanically talented, really communicative, like good shot callers. They just needed the time to learn it. And so then eventually we're able to change our playstyle to a playstyle where we can draft 3 winning lanes of prio. We can draft like Syndra, Renekton, and Lee Sin in first 3 picks and be like, do something about it. We're going to come and snowball on you, right? And that the transition to that like came at an awkward time. And the draft that you're talking about, the Victor draft, like I shit the bed in draft.
I lost money there, I just want to say.
Yeah, sorry about that. We really fucked up in draft, and like we were not planning to play Victor that day. We were planning to get mid prior, and so our mentality was like completely wrong. And also we'd like recently adapted this playstyle, right? So we're like, let's go and fucking contest every Drake. Let's go and smash these guys. And then didn't happen.
No Victor on second.
Oh no, the power pick of Victor. Oh no. I've done you a favor there if you can't play Victor now, by the way. I've done you a favor if you can't play Victor anymore.
Holy shit, they know. They know about the lack of Victor priority.
I fought for a second to play against TSM, and they're gonna. Thank God for not.
Thank
I
God.
like how he just got muted there as if he was gonna like leak strats or something.
I don't know.
Yeah.
This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Dean Tanglis, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, Tobias Bernasconi, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA. Do you want teasers? Who are the guests on the upcoming talk shows, interviews I have? Maybe you want to take part in one of those Patreon donator discussions with me. Well, for any of the above perks and more, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.